First up is Sea Hungry. This has turned out really well. I think it's improved a lot. The animation of the hammer is good. I think you could slow down the animation of the trigger so we can see that better. I think that the smoke is a nice improvement. The smoke you've chosen now looks a lot better, and the flash is working okay. I think that the drop shadow works okay while you still have this background, but you might try fading out the drop shadow, maybe at the same time as the gun, and I think the title would pop more, and especially when it's here, because the drop shadow makes less sense when you have this image behind it, because it's like part of the drop shadow is sort of on that building and parts on the sky, and I think the title would just pop more if you didn't have the drop shadow there. And I might fade out the background before I faded the title versus fading out the title before I faded the background in this case, or just fade it to black all at the same time. But overall, it's really good work. It came out nicely, and you've clearly put a lot of time and effort into it. Okay, next up is Elina. Okay, this has some good improvements. I would still say that the snake image doesn't hold up that well. I'm guessing you turned on motion blur. It's a little hard to tell, but I think you did, which was good. But it still looks a little bit pixelated. Maybe just adding like another blur filter on there on top of it when it animates, just kind of animating up a little bit more blur would help with that snake. I think that it's good that the guns come in from different sides. I think there's something abrupt about the way that presents things shows up. Oops. I think it's partly because that Snake Eyes title doesn't, as soon as it comes up, it immediately starts fading down, and I think it would help to hold for another moment. And then again with presents, it comes up and immediately starts fading down, but just let it stay, let it hold on there before you fade it down. And the smoke behind here is improved, so that's good. And the text looks good. So yeah, definitely some good improvements there. There's more you could do, but overall this came together all right. Next up is Marcus. Good. One thing with the audio, before we move on, is I think that it might be good if the guitar sound came in a little earlier, because it just feels like the ambience noise and it feels a little incomplete. This is better, this logo. It still seems odd, like the size of the M and K seems so much wider than the G. It's generally frowned upon to stretch fonts out in general anyway, but I don't know. It's okay. It's better than it was. I think you did a really good job cleaning up the image with the watermark stuff, and I think the way the cactus moves, I really like the way that foreground cactus wipes the text off the screen there. That's good. It's kind of slick. I think I would like this better if the transition was smoother. So rather than it, you know, finishing the sort of dolly shot across and then push in, if it kind of like, if it was a smoother transition from one movement to the other, like a continuous movement into the sign. I really like the how the holes match the cartoony style of the rest of the artwork, and that worked out really well. And that you can see through the sign, but still see some of the thickness of the sign as well. So those worked out really well. So overall, the piece came together nicely. It's got a very consistent look. And it's very good. I think the area where the most area of improvement is this logo. It just, besides it not moving, I think from a graphic design point of view, it feels a little lopsided. Um, so find a maybe find a way to use some text where you don't have to sort of squash it and stretch it out like you've done. But the title animation is really good. Next up is Amelia. All right. So yeah, there's definitely some good improvements on this. I like that the water is moving. That helps a lot. It might have been good to kind of transition into the back area water. I think I like the concept that the firefly is sort of continuing through both shots. I think that it could have done with more than one, even though the last one was way too many with the hundreds of them. Maybe like a couple smaller ones in the background to sort of flesh it out might have helped. And I had demonstrated how to do the reflection on the water, which might have looked good. And it's a little bit big and blurry. I might have gone for a little bit more opaque and a little bit smaller. But because right now it's not really reading as a firefly. I mean, I think part of the thing with the fireflies is that they're turning on and off and on and off. They're not always on like this is, and I think they're also more like bright points of light than kind of a faded glowy thing. So I think it's an interesting element, and it has some good movement, and it keeps the thing alive and keeps the eye moving. So that's good. But on the other hand, it's not, for me, not necessarily reminiscent of fireflies. So it's a trade-off. But yeah, definitely improvement. The text is looking good and sky and stuff. So yeah, it's a nice piece with a good feel. I think you could do more with that animation stuff, but it's good. And I think the water, if you kind of did a mask that kind of blended, maybe if it went a little further back and then maybe blend it more with a mask with a gradient on it into that reflective part of the water there, that would help a little bit. And I might have gone not so contrasty, not so much dark and light on here, but if it was a little bit more evenly colored, it wouldn't be as. It's a bit busy, the water. So not so much black and white contrasty. But yeah, it's definitely good improvements. Next up is Rhys. Okay. It's definitely improved. I think just thinking about the sounds first. I think it's good you have sound effects, but because they kind of start and stop, I think if you laid some music underneath it, it would kind of flesh it out and make it be more finished. I think I like that you chose to just do the gray bricks the whole time. That helps, and the text definitely looks cleaner than it did before, and that squash is working all right. Um, I think maybe try going with like a bit smaller presents. I mean, the presents is kind of bigger and thicker than the actual uh, logo title, company name. So I would go on with a much kind of smaller, thinner presents because it's kind of taken over a bit on the screen. Like the clock animation, that worked out well, and the text animation is good, and it's much more legible, I think, than what you had before. So that works out well. So yeah, a lot of good improvements here, and um, yeah, I mean a few things you can touch up, but overall it looks pretty good. Next up is Brittany. Alright, this one's definitely improved. I like the logo at the beginning. I think this bell's looks good, and I think it's just pretty simple and clean and iconic, and I think your choice of text works well, and the layout's good, so it might be good to have some kind of animation or movement going on in this one, but or at least like kind of a fade in, fade out. I still feel like this clock is not reminiscent of a Western, and I understood you can find a clock that was, but if you watch just the very last critique, someone had taken a clock face and put it on kind of like an aged wood background, and that read as a clock tower that in the Old West more than this looks like, reminds me of Big Ben or something like that. So, I mean, I think the kind of the sepia tone effect, desaturating thing helps a little bit, but it's still not the right kind of clock. Yeah, I think the movement and timing is good. I think it'd be better if you kind of painted out the clock hand and animated the clock hand moving to make it a little more interesting. And I do like the cracked sort of pocket watch here in the text here, so that worked out well. And you do fade out at the end, so that's good. Next up is Ashley. All right, so definitely good improvements here. I think what you have going for you overall is just a good sense of timing and movement with the motion graphics. I think the first title thing goes kind of quick. Like we barely have time to read it before it leaves the screen, so you might hold on that a little bit longer. That works well. This is better, and it's good that it moves outward like that. I think we needed, because it's just these really simple shards. That I think if there was a lot more motion blur, and you do have motion blur turned on, but I think because it's not giving you enough, I might just crank up just to put a Gaussian blur on there and increase that a lot, so you get away with that better. And then, yeah, maybe have a movie even faster than that. Someone pointed out I guess this has a little bit of perspective on it, but I think giving it more perspective, I think the last time I was saying if you can kind of, make this not this perfectly clean straight line, but like cut into these things a little bit, like round out those and cut out those spaces in between, that might blend it better. I think the gunshots turned out really good because it really looks like broken wood where the holes hit, so that's nice. So yeah, it's got a lot of good stuff going for it, and I think you really have the sense of movement and timing and a good feel for the motion, and that's what really carries this well. So yeah, turned out good. Next up is Jimmy. Nice. So, yeah, it turned out good. It's a pretty cool logo. Um, I think he changed the name or shortened it or something. I think that worked out better. You might have done a little, you could have done a little bit more with the animation on there. I mean, he zooms in and that pops up, so that's all good. It's simple and clean, but maybe there was an opportunity to like, I don't know, animate his hand or cut that out and I don't know, have the eyes glow, just something to give it a little extra punch. Someone mentioned the tumbleweed rotating the wrong way, and I could sort of buy it, you know, rotating backwards if while it's in the air, kind of, and then maybe when it hits, change direction and rotate forward. But when it rotates backwards the whole time and bounces, it's a little hard to believe. I like the T rotating down. That works well. Um, Might have been good to put a little sound effect with that. And the as far as I know, you have the boo-hoo thing, and that's good. But I think a little kind of like creaking sound might have brought that to life a little more. But yeah, it came together nicely. Um, Looks good. Next up is Cody. Okay, some good improvements here. I think the choice of artwork is much better. I do think there was an opportunity here to cut out the hand and the gun and fill in the background behind it and have it fire the thing and have the little shells fly off. Could have been kind of cool, or maybe do something where the text comes in. I think this gets pretty crowded here. This text when the presents on this edge, so I might have if you want to keep the text where it is, I might have sort of redrawn this to give yourself some more breathing room so it doesn't get so tight in there. And also maybe maybe you don't need quite so much space between each of the lines, and that could have helped as well to like pull those different lines together a little bit more, like move the A down and move the production presents up. I'm not loving the font because it seems like it's from a very different world, either from the logo or from the film title. So I kind of want it to be in one world or another as far as that's good. I like the gunshots. You improved this one, and that's good. So that turned out well. Maybe some smoke could have brought it to life a little bit further. But yeah, um, definitely good improvements. Okay, next up is Jasmine. So yeah, you've got some different elements going on here. I think that one thing that's happening that's a little jarring is, well, first there's the extreme change in music, and then also the extreme change in style, and it's a straight cut that doesn't fade out and fade back in, and I think both for the audio and for the visual there should be more of a transition from one to the other if you're going to do such an extreme change, or even if you're not. I thought this text is not doing great against that kind of busy background. So, finding a different solution for that might have good, whether it's a different color or doing the text down here or, having the background become a little bit more desaturated and lower contrast or, some combination of those things. And the font doesn't really say much of anything. I think good idea to have the fly flying, but at the same time, there's sort of you have a realistic fly image, but then it doesn't. If you could have it move in such kind of a slow and cartoony way, it might have been better to go with and you have a very cartoony fly trap. it might have made more sense to go with a cartoony shaped fly, but it would also be good to get like a wing flap cycle going on there. I think the other thing is that, it being a fly trap film, I think you really want to see that fly trap close on the fly rather than the fly flying away at the end. Here, I think what's really hurting you is this resolution of this backdrop image is not sufficient for the video. And the fact that this is sort of like a vector image with very sharp lines against that background makes it all the more apparent that the font is, both the font and the backdrop image are insufficient resolution, and you have this super pixelated font. I don't know if that was intentional, the real pixelated look, but it's, anyways, these different elements, this low res, kind of very compressed looking background image, this very sharp vector tumbleweed, and then the pixelated font. I don't think those three things really quite mesh together, and really there's no, you kind of just can't have a highly compressed blurry background image because it's really kind of hurting the overall look of this. The only way to salvage something like that is to blur it. You can kind of get away with it a little bit if you do that, but as it is, it's just the image quality doesn't look so great. So yeah, I think the things going on, there's a lot of different colors, a lot of different styles, everything kind of all mixed together, and it doesn't have there's not like a cohesive look to either the first section or the section, and then they don't transition well together. So I think this could use some improvement, but you did get some elements together, you got some animation going, and that's all good. Next up is Henri. So yeah, on the one hand, I think you've done a nice job believably getting this text to look like it's been etched into the bullet, but on the other hand, there's something kind of low resolution and blurry about the image that makes it not quite hold up. So I think that, yeah, that needs to be kind of worked out. Because if you look at this image, it looks really, it's got some sharp resolution and it looks clean, but somehow, maybe because we're zoomed in too far. But I guess what I would say is then, if you started with that full screen and then you added this in here, at least the text could be sharp so it's easy to read, but right now it's a little grainy and blurry. So, definitely points for getting it to look like etching, but then because it's not a clean, sharp text, it makes it very hard to read. Like, I can barely, a cattle, something, it's like you can barely read that. I don't even know what it says hardly. So, yeah, it needs to be sharper and clearer. I like the bull image there. Actually, when it pulls back, it's sort of easier to read when it's close up, because now we're looking at this in its full resolution, but when we zoom in, it's sort of a bit too zoomed in. Sort of the catch with that, I guess. But I think that the text didn't have to be zoomed in so much. The text could have been, like if you scaled up that image, and that so that when we were at this distance, this kind of close-up distance, like if you had that and scaled this up to, the full like HD, like 92 by 1080, and then in that full size image, then add the text, it would look sharp. And this is good. I just think that it's very small for the title, so you could have done something like have the bullet fade away and then have that scale up or something like that at the end. But yeah, I think you had an ambitious idea. You have some good images. I think a lot of things came together, and definitely improvement. Smoke looks good, so yeah, a lot of things are working well here. Right now we've got Michelle. All right. I think the yeah, a lot of good improvements here. I think the smoke looks good. I think maybe it's a little feels a little more chimney than that kind of wispy cigarette. I might have dug around a little bit more for a different smoke, but it's all right. It could be funny too, since it's Ash Studio, to do something with some ash filling, since it's not Smoke Studio or Cigarette Studio, it's Ash Studio. So there's an opportunity, like how sometimes people have this like extra long ash they haven't like flicked it for a while, like to have like some extended long thing fall down might have been a fun bit, but it's all right as it is. It's a good drawing, and I like that you've used video. I think that really brings this to life. I think that for this text fading out, I would have done that at the same time. It's a little weird that the N lingers longer than the Jeff Pablo. And maybe not go so long with the fade out. I think you can, fade the text in, hold it there, and then kind of fade it out a little closer to the end and not such a long fade out. Not really a fan of how the letters are bleeding into their neighbors or bleeding into themselves. So I don't know if that was, something like an outline that ended up, the same color as a text, making it thicker, or how that happened. But yeah, it doesn't look that clean in that. But the font's fine, and the video backgrounds worked out well. So overall, it's a good piece. It worked out.